so he focused on that to attract support. He also tried to use the spread of Marxism as a way of, as defining it as against. He characterized Marxism as against Western culture, which sounds confusing, but it worked. He also used a lot of propaganda, like the Little Red Book was like a whole thing about how Macedon was the best ever, which you can see in right here, this picture. They're holding up their little red books. And it was really important that everyone carried a red book because it showed the distribution. And he created elite groups. So although he banned social class almost, he still had elite groups who supported the Cultural Revolution, which he created. And it targeted youth and children. And these children were selected as special groups or leaders, and they're called the Red Guards. And they would go visit Chairman Mao at his rallies, and then go back to school and tell their friends about how amazing it was, and how they bawled when they saw him, and how great he was, which spread the idea that he was an amazing person because of these children telling their friends. Chairman Mao also repressed a lot of his opponents, and he used humiliation as a tactic. And he knew that there are a lot of richer families in China still, and he didn't want them to come together and talk about traditional values. Since they liked the traditional values, they are more likely to talk about it. And so he humiliated them publicly by putting them in dunce caps and hanging signs from their necks that basically delegitimized them. And also it caused people to look down on them and publicly look down on richness in society. Also, the 100 Flowers campaign, although no one has actually proven that it was a way for Chairman Mao to root out his opponents, it was one way where he found out who disagreed with him, where he said people could tell their opinion freely and there would be no consequence. But it turns out there was a consequence, and he ended up killing all these people, or sending them away to labor camps in order to reform their view of him. And then the Cultural Revolution was a huge part of this by repressing opponents. Any old ideas were totally looked down on, and they had to make sure that anything that Mao said was up to date. Anything he said, even if it was an old idea that was repurposed, was new. And it was huge because it targeted youth, and it repressed older people, older citizens, and those who maintained wealth. Also, he burned all the books, so there'd be no evidence that could prove him wrong. And it allowed the Little Red Book, to become super popular because it was the only literature. He also killed people and took credit from them, which is a huge aspect of his regime. Okay, so Cuba, we'll talk about two people here, Batista, which is in the picture shown, and then also Castro. So Batista, how he attracted support was by having these likable personality traits, like a great sense of humor, and he used these to get elected the first time. But before, he had puppet presidents that allowed people to think there was somebody else in charge, which subdued the crowds from thinking he was a dictator. He also put up rival parties when he was president, or dictator, I guess. But he put up rival parties so that people would think that there was a chance for somebody else to get elected, but he was elected anyways. He also led a lot of coalitions to get people to unite against bad parties, and he was seen as elite after he had been in the army for a while. But Batista also repressed people because he, after he won the first election, he canceled the second election and just gave himself the presidency, or he became a dictator basically. And that oppressed anybody else who wanted to run against him. Any opponents couldn't say anything because he canceled the second election, which allows for no views to come in and no people's opinions to come in. Also, one person in particular, Antonio Guterres, in 1935, I believe, he like organized student demonstrations against Batista, and Batista did not appreciate that and murdered him. He also suspended the Constitution to become a dictator, and that was huge because it like limited the citizens' power. Um, Castro, the way he attracted support was he kind of did what Chairman Mao did. He went on a march. Actually, he was running away from Batista because Batista sent them out in exile, and Castro led a march, and he picked up the poor people along the way and told them about these great ideas he had that were perfect for Cuba. And then he also used coalitions to reestablish peace because he figured unification would quell the crowds, or calm the crowds, quell the crowds. He also joined or like supported Russia, which was a huge aspect in the Cold War, and he like pushed away the U.S. and that was a very popular opinion in Cuba after Batista had basically Batista basically took U.S. dollars and U.S. richmen and used their power to get in money, but ignored all the Cuban people or all the Cuban poor people, and that made a lot of citizens in Cuba really angry. But Castro completely ignored U.S. and kind of made the U.S. angry, and they went with the USSR, and that allowed for like more citizen support. But Castro also repressed his opponents. He first of all, his opponent was the U.S., and to repress them, he had a trade embargo with them, which showed like distrust, and also told them that he wasn't a friend. He also, any foreign trade he got, he destroyed right away so that nobody would know what they got, and they also felt like self-sufficient. And then in 1980, I think, he did this thing where he said, anyone who just doesn't want to be in Cuba, anyone who disagrees with what I think, anyone who wants to leave should just leave. It was called the Mario Boat Lift, and that was huge because 125,000 Cubans left and went to Florida because they disagreed with Castro's views but couldn't do anything about it, which was huge because it basically got rid of all of his opponents who disagreed with him and let people who either didn't have the money or believed in his views to stay and support him. And then also in the beginning, when he was first trying to establish his reign, he had firing squad executions, which still lasted throughout most of his time as leader. And they're basically just killings where he picked up people he didn't like or who did something stupid and executed them publicly with a firing squad. So to recap, some similarities. There's a lot of killing or erasing people. Although Castro did kill people, it was publicly, while Stalin, China, and Batista did a covert kind of erasing. So like Stalin particularly would kill somebody and then like Photoshop them out of the picture so that no one would know he existed or she existed. And then another huge thing was the burning of literature, or like the denouncing of intellectual ideas and thoughts, like ideologies. That allowed these leaders to rule without any opposition or intelligence, basically reason against them. And then, yeah, Cuba and the USSR chose to make an alliance with each other for support, which was huge for those two countries. But no other country tried to do that. They eventually did, but it wasn't a huge part of their way to attract support. And then propaganda was a huge part in every single piece. They ranged from pictures to slogans to elites, and then they also had specific books, like the Little Red Book. All of them tried to get support for their idea, and a lot of them also used poor to gain support or gain power, and they used the poor to basically get masses of people together to revolt against something. Although, surprisingly, Castro used student power as well to get to go against Batista. The main difference is that only Mao and Batista tried to have rival parties or opinions, and they both decided in the end to go with the other countries, and just not have any other opinion. They found that having other opinions was just too much, and it epically failed in terms of having rival parties or the 100 Flowers campaign. They epically failed. Anyways, I hope you learned about power. Awesome. Bye.